Chapter 18 looks at managing service and manufacturing operations. Here's a list of the course learning outcomes. You may pause here and read them if you like. We start out by looking at what is productivity. And productivity just looks at how many inputs it takes to produce or create an output. So, and inputs can be a variety of things like labor and actual supplies and the components that go into making something. Operations management really looks at managing the daily production of goods and services and looks at how can we be as productive and efficient and effective as possible. So why do we care about productivity? Well, productivity leads to lower costs. It leads to faster service, more market share, better profits, better and more affordable products and services. It also can lead to higher wages, more charitable giving, a better standard of living in our society. There's two ways to measure productivity. Those are partial and multi-factor productivity. So partial productivity just looks at one type of input. So for example, we might be looking at how much labor do we need to put in order to get our output, which might be a product or a service that we provide. And multi-factor productivity looks at all of the pieces that go into creating something or productivity. So labor, capital, materials, and energy, and in turn, and how much of each of these it takes to produce your output. So one way that we can be more productive is through the use of robots and automation. So robots are machines or programs that are able to complete complex tasks. So process automation is kind of in this example right here with the orange robots, where you automate routine or highly repetitive, low complexity, or single purpose tasks. So instead of having a person to do these highly repetitive tasks, which can actually lead to injuries, we have robots do it. Intelligent recognition is using automation programming to recognize and react to patterns in speech, language, images, and other items. So as you can see on the bottom of my screen, PowerPoint can create closed captioning on the bottom just by recognizing my speech and what I'm saying. That would be an example of intelligent recognition. And then collaborative or social recognition is when humans and robots work together. And you'll see this a lot in manufacturing facilities where maybe the person sets it up and then the robot does the work. And again, it takes away from some of the heavy lifting or some of the repetitive motions that humans would otherwise have to do. And a lot of times robots can actually do it better because they're able to be more precise. All right, so when we look at production, we also want to look at quality. And so quality is just looking at a product or service that is free of deficiencies, or how we create a product or deliver a service in order to satisfy customers' needs. And so a quality product is reliable, it's serviceable, meaning that it can be easily fixed, or sometimes it's not easily fixed if it breaks. And durability looks at how high quality is it, how easy or not easy is it that something will go wrong with that product. Service characteristics of a quality service again are reliability, so consistently performing a service well. Tangibles refer to the appearance of the offices, the equipment, or the personnel. Responsiveness, the willingness and promptness of which service occurs. Assurance is things like training, the confidence that the service person or the person providing the service has, so how knowledgeable, how courteous, how trustworthy. And then empathy is giving attention, taking care of customers' concerns, really just helping them to solve their problems. All right, one way that we can measure quality or ensure that we have a quality product or service is through the ISO um, standards. Um, and it's just the purpose, basically, the ISO agency develops and publishes standards that help to facilitate international exchange of goods and services. The ISO 9000 series is a series of 5 standards that go from 9000 to 9004 to look at achieving consistency in quality management and quality assurance. All right, the 14,000 series really looks at how do we manage, monitor, and minimize harmful effects on the environment. And the 27,000 series looks at monitoring security specifically in terms of information technology. Another really popular concept that you'll hear in the workplace is the concept of total quality management. Total quality management isn't any specific tool or technique. Rather, it's a philosophy or an approach to management that looks at customers, focus, customer satisfaction, continuous improvement, and teamwork. So we're really trying to look and solve customers' problems and satisfy their needs, making sure customers are satisfied that our products and services meet or exceed those standards, those expectations. Continuous improvement, always aiming to do better. Um, Variation really looks at the less a product varies from the quality standard or the more consistent it is, the higher quality it is. So when we're looking at variation, we actually don't want variation in the quality because we're trying to have consistency across the board. And then teamwork is collaboration across the organization, across the functions, between companies, between customers, between suppliers. So when we're looking at, specifically in terms of service, there's something called the service profit chain. And this is looking at internal service quality. So basically it's saying if upper management treats their employees well, employees are satisfied, employees feel empowered, then they'll provide good customer service, which will ultimately lead to an increase in profits and growth. And so that's just, what this is showing here. If there is a situation where somebody is not satisfied, we call this service recovery. And this is just looking at how can employees help dissatisfied customers. There was an article I read quite a while ago, but it basically said that if a customer is unsatisfied, the number one thing that they're really just looking for is an apology or to have their product or their service replaced. So it can be very simple in order to remedy the issue. Really just, I'm sorry, or how can I make it better? So we need to empower our employees to be able to make those decisions to solve those customers' problems. And we talked about that in other chapters. All right, so we also look at how do we classify manufacturing. So now we're kind of moving from service to manufacturing. So if I'm making a product, there's different ways to make it. And so one of them is make to order. And this is when we don't make a product until it's ordered by a customer. And so this is an example of a sign you could buy on Etsy that's customized, and they wouldn't make it until somebody had placed that order. And assemble to order, computers are a really great example. They'll have like the keyboards and different processors and screens and so forth, and then they just take the various component parts to create the computer that you want if you were to order one very specifically. And then make to stock operation is just really more standardized products. So soda is an example of, Coca-Cola company just and Pepsi and so forth. They go and they just make their sodas and then they send them to stores and people buy them. So that's a make to stock operation. There's also different ways that we can manufacture our products and services. And this is how quickly and easily we can change between the number and kinds and characteristics of products we produce. So one is a continuous flow. So here you see donuts on the conveyor belt, and this is just continuously manufacturing donuts on this line. So continuous flow production. All right, this is the least flexible, it's the hardest to change. A line flow production, here you have the cars, and basically what happens here is it goes down the line and different parts are added to it. And so it occurs in a linear manner. All right, a batch production, think about if you make a batch of cookies. All right, so again, in the donut situation, they might make a batch of donuts and then a batch of cookies and then a batch of bread. So it's a little bit more flexible, and what you're doing is you're just making a lot. I want to use that. You're making large batches, and then you're switching between those. And then a job shop these are for much smaller orders or more custom orders, and so you handle customer orders or small batch jobs, and so you just do small amounts at one time. And obviously, the way that you manufacture is going to be, partially determined by how big your company is, and by what you're manufacturing. All right. We also need to look at inventory. So inventory is just how much, the amount and number of raw materials, parts, and finished products that we have. So raw materials are just our basic inputs. And so a raw material, for example, might be you might purchase steel or aluminum or rubber to make parts of a car. All right. Component parts, for example, on an automobile plant, steel is fabricated or processed into a car's body panels. And so you might have body panels as a component part. Works in progress are when we start to manufacture something and it's partially finished. That's a work in progress, and then finished goods are ultimately our end product. Right? And so we can look at measuring inventory. Average aggregate inventory is our overall inventory during a particular time period. So a lot of times we might say how many weeks would it take us to run out of this. All right. A stock out is basically just when we run out of finished products. Inventory turnover is the number of times a year that a company sells or turns over its average inventory. So that's a third measure of inventory. The reason why we care about how much inventory we have is because it costs money to have inventory. So there's costs included with ordering, data entry, getting bids, determining when and how much inventory to order, setup costs, so occur when a machine is changed or adjusted to produce a different kind of inventory. There's holding costs. It costs us money to hold inventory that hasn't been sold. And there's stockout costs. So these are costs of when we don't have enough inventory. And ultimately, we're losing money because we don't have anything to sell. There's different ways we can manage inventory. There's something called the economic order quantity, and this is just a formula that minimizes ordering and holding costs and helps us to determine how much and how often inventory should be ordered. A really popular one that you'll hear about is just-in-time inventory system, and so this is when the component parts or the final product show up at a retailer or at a production facility at exactly the time that they need them. So this helps to save money because we're not ordering a whole bunch and putting our money into that and then having it just sit there. And a big reason why this is possible is because of shared information systems and coordination between the supplier and the manufacturer and the retailer. Kanban is a ticket-based just-in-time inventory system, and this just helps to indicate when it's time to reorder inventory. Materials requirement planning, this is really helping to determine the production schedule, our batch sizes, and the inventory needed. And then there's materials requirement planning, and this is a production and inventory system to look at a production schedule, our batch sizes,